Capitol Review. With President Donald Trump's second term approaching its 100-day mark, less than half of Americans polled approve of how he's handling the job so far. Now, while his strongest supporters still approve of his performance to date, there are some concerns. So how important is polling so early in the president's second term? And joining us now is Jim Lee with Susquehanna Polling and Research. Jim, welcome back to Capitol Review.
Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here today.
You know, it's always a pleasure to have you. What is President Trump's approval rating nationally?
Nationally, 46%, Mark, of registered voters approve of the job the president's doing, and a higher 52% disapprove of the job he's doing. What's particularly important about that is that, remember, Trump got 49.8% of the national popular vote in the 2024 election against Joe Biden, and then ultimately Kamala Harris. So he's underperforming the vote that he got in the 2024 election, and his poll numbers are down, Mark, across the board.
Jimmy, you've been doing this for a long time. How does the president's approval rating after the first quarter of his term compare to other former presidents?
Mark, the average job approval rating for an incumbent president after their first 3 months in office from 1952 to 2020 is 60%. That's the average, looking at all presidents between 1952 and 2020. Trump is the only president, the only one that's under 50%. The highest was John F. Kennedy and Dwight Eisenhower, who had approval ratings above 70%. There were 3 presidents that had approval ratings between 60 and 69%. Those were Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, and Ronald Reagan. Then there were 4 that had approval ratings in the mid-50s, both George Bush's, Joe Biden, and Bill Clinton. That leaves Trump, who's the only president to be polling under 50% with his 46% approval rating. And he's been firing back at some of the national media for some of the polling that's been out there I've seen lately.
Jim, what does polling show in terms of areas where the president is either underperforming or overperforming?
Well, the funny thing about it is, Mark, he's not overperforming really on any issues. Immigration was always his signature issue. And when you ask Americans conceptually, do they support using tariffs as a negotiating tool to bring foreign leaders to the table, a majority of Americans say they support that. But on the Trump tariffs themselves, most Americans disapprove of the job the president's doing on tariffs, and immigration has always been a signature issue for Trump. So tariffs and immigration are the 2 issues that Trump really campaigned heavily on in 2024. Immigration, his numbers have sagged because a lot of people believe he's been too strict and has enacted on some unconstitutional grounds, getting citizens deported. The tariffs have been too much for people to swallow. On all the other issues, on Canada, on Greenland, the Panama Canal, eliminating the Department of Education, most Americans disapprove of the job the president's doing on those issues. So he is not in a strong position nationally.
Jim, quickly, you've been doing this for such a long time. What moves people in the polls? If the president can accomplish some big things, will these numbers change?
They should. One of the numbers that I think the president is following closely is that 44% of Americans, Mark, say they trust the president to do the right thing on the economy. But a higher 55% say they don't trust the president to do the right thing on the economy. Americans are struggling right now with economic anxiety, high prices at the pump, inflation, grocery prices that are exceedingly high. If Trump can do something on those issues, he can change the narrative and produce some wins in his column. I mean, we all remember President Trump saying, "You're going to be so sick of winning when I'm president, you're not going to do with all the wins. Not going to know what to do with all the wins." We haven't seen many wins yet.
All right, Jim Lee, thank you so very much for joining us on Capitol Review.
Nice to be here, Mark.